So we have just 2 days or so until 2018 ends, and with that, I wanted to revive a series, or I guess a video I did last year, which if you think about it, it's kind of weird thinking about last year, but last year I made a video called the best Yu-Gi-Oh card of 2017, and I thought that was a great video. I predicted Firewall was the best card of 2017, and as 2018 has shown, I was pretty correct on that assumption. So in today's video, I thought, hey, why don't we do another one? If the first one was so good, then why isn't there a second one? So in today's video, I'll be talking about the best Yu-Gi-Oh card of 2018. So just remember, I'm not going to state Firewall Dragon. Last year, I was able to state Firewall Dragon because it was released that year. However, this year is different because, I mean, it's 2018. So, with that in mind, we're not going to mention Firewall. However, regardless of Firewall not being mentioned on here, there are still some pretty amazing cards that were released this year. For example, we have all the Knightmares, including Goblin, Phoenix, and Unicorn, which all really provided great utility or crazy combo extension. Goblin was a Seraphonite that gave your monsters protection through targeting. Knightmare, Phoenix, and Unicorn and Cerberus gave amazing removal to your decks. And so overall, these cards just became staples in the extra deck, like how rank 4s and just Xyz monsters did back in the day, and Synchros, I guess, etc. We also have more archetype focused cards like Engage. We have the Thunder Dragon Colossus. We have Electromite, where Engage was really amazing as a card for Sky Striker, because obviously if you had an Engage in hand with 3 spells engraved, you were about to go off. You had Colossus, which is a very easy to make, hard to deal with boss monster. It's basically a Link 1, that's why it's so crazy. And then you have a card like Electromite, which you were very easily able to play 3 copies of it, and also Starving Venom, and it just got very crazy from there. We also have a new hand trap by the name of Infinite Impermanence. Infinite Impermanence is basically one of the 2 best hand traps right now, and while that might change in the future depending on the format, Impermanence will always be a great card from here on out. And I know you could have said that about Effect Veiler, and obviously Impermanence has pseudo replaced Veiler, but Veiler is still a pretty good card. However, Impermanence definitely has replaced it, and Impermanence is in an entire category of its own compared to Effect Veiler. We also have Borrelsword Dragon. Borrelsword Dragon, obviously being another Borrel monster, being really powerful as it just enables so many easy OTKs. We have had so many great Yu-Gi-Oh cards this year, but I really do think the best Yu-Gi-Oh card of 2018 is Topologic Gumblar Dragon. You guys maybe expected this, maybe you didn't, but I really do honestly think that Topologic Gumblar Dragon is highly degenerate, and that really warrants me to put it at the #1 spot and make it the best Yu-Gi-Oh card of 2018. However, why would I say this? Well, I'm sure a lot of you guys know the effect, but for the people who don't, it's effects or stats. It's a Link for Dark Cyber's effect monster with 3000 attack. Its Link arrows are top, right, left, and bottom. Its materials are 2+ effect monsters, and it has the following effect. If another monster is special summoned to a zone a Link monster points to while this monster is on the field, discard 1 or 2 random cards, then your opponent discards the same number. During your main phase, if this card is extra linked and your opponent has at least 1 card in their hand, you can make your opponent discard 1 or 2 cards, whichever is higher. Then if they have no more cards in their hand, inflict 3000 damage to them. You can only use 1 Topologic Gumblar Dragon effect per turn, and only once that turn. So, there are quite a few reasons as to why this card is good. Maybe you can already see the idea where it says, discard 1 or 2 random cards, but we'll get into this. So obviously, as I already stated, it gives you the option of 1 or 2 cards. Being able to trigger this effect and have your opponent, and regardless of yourself discarding 2, there are ways around that, but you discard 2 random cards, your opponent chooses 2 cards in their hand to discard, and well, it's an even trade right there. However, what gets crazy is when you're playing a deck oriented around that. So for example, if you were playing Dangers in your deck and you discarded a Danger Nessie, you would get more value off of that. If you're playing a Warrior deck and you sent a Phoenix Blade and recurred it, if you discard that Phoenix Blade, there are still ways of getting it back. Plus, basically essentially saying, I didn't go neg, but you went neg. The other thing is, it states 1 or 2 cards, so if you only have 1 card in hand, you can still make them discard 1 card. But regardless, you're probably not going to be in that situation on your turn, however, you might be on your opponent's turn. Because of the way it's worded, you can use it on your turn and your opponent's turn. So basically, the way you would trigger this is through a card like Link Kuriboh, Mass Change 2, etc. You summon a monster to a zone a Link monster points to, activating Gumblar's effect. Then if on your opponent's turn you activate another effect, or just summon another monster to a zone a Link monster points to, it doesn't even need to be Gumblar, then in that case, you have to use this effect again. But how would you do this on your opponent's turn? Well, there are plenty of options. One way is by using Link Kuriboh to tribute a level 1 monster and summon it on your field to a zone Gumblar points to during your opponent's turn, and summon that level 1 during your turn. And an example of this is with Gokis. You could easily play through a Droll and Lockbird and have your opponent go down to 1 card in hand because of Gumblar. Basically, you would use Goki Rematch to summon 2 Gokis from your grave, one of them obviously being Octo Stretch. Gumblar will activate its effect, and then you can go to your opponent's turn, use Link Kuriboh in your graveyard to summon it back, and discard 2 more cards. You also have Mass Change 2, which is another card that was used for the Dark Warrior strategies that ran about a bit earlier this year. So basically, you would summon a monster to a zone Gumblar points to, use Mass Change 2, summon Darklaw, and discard 2 more cards. Another way of doing this as well, in case you can't summon something on your opponent's turn, is just to summon something to Gumblar zone, and then link from there for another Link monster like Phoenix, for example. Then you can summon a monster to your zone on your opponent's turn, and then trigger Gumblar's effect, in case you can't summon a monster to your zone because there's already a monster occupying that zone. The second big thing is the fact that it's just so generic and easy to summon. Think about it, Isolde climbs into this card very easily, and is easily able to enable you to go ahead and Gumblar discard for 4, plus a Darklaw. That is very powerful if you ask me. And in general, the fact that it just requires 2+ effect monsters is so freaking generic because it just requires any 2 effect monsters. Unlike the Borrel monsters, which require 3+ effect monsters, you can use even Summon Sorceress for this, making your life even easier. Because remember, when you use Summon Sorceress effect, you will have link materials of 5. So you can link with the 2 monsters for a Gumblar, and then link for a Link 1, for example, whatever you feel like. The last point actually might surprise you, but the last point I'll mention is hand control. So think about it, if your opponent has 2 engages in their hand, you can use Gumblar and discard the 2 cards out of their hand. This is actually very practical for decks like Goki when they can't kill the opponent. This 100% comes up, and I really think is pretty good. So those were my 3 reasons, and there are more reasons, but I won't go too far in depth on them. And while there are more, I do want to point out one more thing. Why the extra link boards were so good, besides just the traditional extra link. So a traditional extra link would consist of the Knightmare protection from battle card effects and targeting, and Trigate is still ridiculously good as a negate, but otherwise you wouldn't really have anything else going for that board. If your opponent sets 2 floodgates, like let's say for example 2 rivalries for example, you automatically lose that game because your floodgates were just outed, and then you can do everything you want because you still had 6 cards to play with. However, the key difference is with Gumblar, you are easily able to discard 4 cards out of your opponent's hand along with that entire extra link. Considering all of that, and the fact that you will have 2 floodgates to use on your opponent, even through all of that, then you can just link into something like a Borrelsword, for example, and attack for game very easily. So I feel like Gumblar was an essential piece in order to make extra link decks as powerful as they were. Even though, yes, extra link decks were still powerful regardless, Gumblar was the finishing touch, and while Summon Sorceress was also there, Gumblar was the cherry on top to really make that strategy as powerful as it was. It can definitely be win more at times, but in other scenarios, Gumblar was the reason you auto-won a match. But overall, guys, while there were quite a lot of good cards this year, Gumblar is honestly just so gosh darn good, and while maybe not the most impactful card of this year, I mean, obviously, like other generic cards were very impactful this year. However, Gumblar is definitely the most degenerate card released this year, at least in my opinion, and with that, this card should definitely be banned eventually, and honestly, in my opinion, deserves the #1 spot as the best Yu-Gi-Oh card of 2018. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a comment down below with your thoughts as to what the best Yu-Gi-Oh card of 2018 is. As well, comment down below with your ideas for a discussion for another video, and your comment might just be picked for the next video and featured in it. Anyways, guys, if you want to support me further than just the YouTube comment section, go down into the description and support me on Patreon. It helps out quite tremendously. As well, if you guys want to join the YuGiOh community further than just the YouTube comment section, go down into the description and join my Discord server. I'd love to have you guys there. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and with that, I hope to see you soon.